Welcome back to Under Baobab Skies. Tonight we drift eastward to where the Indian Ocean kisses the shores of Africa. We travel to a coastline that smells of salt and coral, where the wind carries whispers of Arabic traders, coral houses, and fishermen's prayers. Tonight we delve into the lives of the Swahili fishermen, men who rose before dawn, mended their nets in silence, and faced an ocean that could bless or destroy in a single wave. The Swahili coast has always been more than a line of sand. It is a meeting place between Africa and Arabia, between trade and survival, between the calm of sunrise and the chaos of storms. Here, life depended on rhythm, the pull of the moon, the taste of the wind, the sound of oars cutting through dark water. Each morning began not with a clock, but with the color of the tide. The sky itself was their almanac, its hues telling them whether the day would bring calm seas or brewing tempests. The ocean gave everything: food, wealth, songs, stories, but it also took suns swallowed by waves, boats splintered by coral, and hopes dragged beneath tempests that arrived without warning. To fish in these waters was not just a job, it was an act of faith. To row out before sunrise was to gamble with the ocean's moods, praying it remembered mercy. For the Swahili, the sea was both a provider and a powerful, untamable force, a duality they respected with every fiber of their being. Beneath the tide, the elders would say, the ocean hides both food and fury. That was the lesson every child of the coast learned before they learned to swim. And so, the fishermen of Swahili towns like Lamu, Kilwa, and Mombasa lived in delicate balance between devotion and danger, between hunger and hope. This wisdom was passed down through generations, not in books, but in proverbs, in the quiet nods between a father and son as they prepared their dhows for the journey into the vast, unpredictable blue. The world we enter tonight is slow and salt-touched. It moves with the rhythm of waves, the call to prayer at dawn, and the slap of nets against wooden planks. Every sound carries memory of ancestors who read the sea's moods by scent, and of mothers who sang to the horizon, waiting for their sons to return. This soundscape is the heartbeat of the coast, a constant reminder of the community's deep, intertwined relationship with the ocean that surrounds them. The vessel of their trade, the dhow, is more than just a boat. Carved from local wood, its elegant, curved prow is a testament to centuries of shipbuilding knowledge, blending African ingenuity with Arabian design. Each plank and rope tells a story of journeys made, of storms weathered, and of bountiful catches brought home to feed families. The fishermen knew their dhows intimately, treating them not as tools, but as partners in their daily struggle for survival. The Latin sail, a large triangular canvas, was their engine, catching the monsoon winds that dictated the seasons of trade and travel. Their connection to the sea was deeply spiritual. Before pushing off, prayers were whispered, seeking protection and a fruitful voyage. The ocean was seen as a living entity, with moods and spirits that needed to be appeased. Offerings were sometimes made, a small portion of the catch returned to the water in gratitude. This spiritual reverence was woven into the fabric of daily life, a constant acknowledgement of their dependence on a power far greater than themselves. It was a humility born from living so close to nature's immense and unpredictable strength. Life on the water was a symphony of coordinated effort. As the sun climbed higher, the fishermen worked in unison, their movements practiced and fluid. Casting the heavy nets was an art form, a synchronized dance between several men to ensure the net spread wide and sank deep. Hauling it back required immense strength and teamwork. Their chants and songs echoing across the water, turning labor into a communal ritual. Each pull of the rope was a gamble, a moment of anticipation, wondering what the sea had decided to offer them that day. When the dhows returned, their sails full against the afternoon sky, the shore would come alive. Women and children would gather, their bright kangas a splash of color against the sand. The day's catch, glimmering silverfish, crabs, and perhaps even a prized tuna was a cause for celebration. The fish were sorted, some for the market, some for the family meal. The air would fill with the sizzle of fish grilling over charcoal, the aroma of coconut and spices mingling with the salty breeze. This was the reward for their courage, a communal feast that reaffirmed the bonds of family and community. So, let's step quietly into this tide-born world, into a coast built on courage, hunger, and unbroken faith. And the story begins now. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more tales from under the African sky. Your support helps us continue to share these important narratives. We'll see you next time. You are under Baobab skies, and the story begins now. Imagine this: dawn in Zanzibar, 300 years ago. The ocean glows like a living mirror, pulsing with the first light of day. A man, let's call him Hassan, tightens a simple rope around his waist. This isn't just a rope, it's his lifeline, his fishing line, coiled neatly beside him in his small wooden dhow as it rocks against the tide. He squints towards the horizon, where a faint blush of pink is just breaking across the vast Indian Ocean. His stomach growls, a familiar ache. He hasn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, but he must go, because if he returns empty-handed, his family won't eat at all. By the end of our journey today, you, LL, understand what it truly meant to live by the mercy of the sea, to rise with its rhythm, to fear its storms, and to depend on it for every single meal. This wasn't a peaceful pastime, a relaxing weekend hobby. For the men of the Swahili coast, fishing was a daily test of will, a confrontation with nature itself. The sea offered no guarantees. One day, it might bless a village with abundance, filling every basket and every belly. The next, it could bring nothing but heartbreak and empty nets. The men who fished it were both respected and pitied. Respected for their raw bravery, but pitied for the poverty that clung to them like the sea salt on their skin. Their tools were as simple as their lives were hard. A hand-woven net, meticulously repaired night after night. A sharpened spear for the shallows, and an unwavering faith. Most fishermen couldn't afford expensive metal hooks. Instead, they carved their own from bone or shell, each one a small work of art born from necessity. Their boats, small dhows, or dugout canoes were miracles of ingenuity, hewn from mangrove trunks, sealed with sticky tree resin, and bound together with coconut rope. They leaked, of course, they always leaked. The fishermen would patch them with palm fiber, their lips moving in silent prayers to whichever spirit they believed was listening. But the hardest part wasn't the back-breaking rowing or the constant bailing of water. It was learning to read the sea. This wasn't a skill you learned from a book. It was a language you absorbed through your very bones. Every ripple on the water's surface, every shift in the wind, carried a message. A sudden chill might signal an approaching squall, a storm that could appear from nowhere and swallow a boat whole. A flock of seabirds, circling low and frantic, might mark the presence of a school of fish-oar, just as easily herald an oncoming storm. To survive, you had to learn the sea's language, one heartbeat, one wave, one breath at a time. It was an intuition that separated the living from the lost. Hunger was the other constant companion on these shores. Even in seasons of plenty, there were mouths the sea simply refused to feed. A single tear in a net, a seemingly small misfortune, could mean days of empty cooking pots and the quiet, gnawing pain of starvation for an entire family. And when the storms rolled in, everything stopped. The markets fell silent. Fish, unable to be sold, would spoil on the sand. Debts would grow, and with them, tempers would flare. Many fishermen were forced to borrow money from wealthier traders just to repair their boats or replace a lost net. But these loans were chains. The interest rates were cruel, designed to keep the poor indebted. Some men spent their entire lives trying to pay off the debt from one single bad season, trapped in a cycle they could never escape. To make matters worse, the competition was fierce. Every village dotted along the coast depended on the same finite fishing grounds. By sunrise, dozens of boats would scatter across the same patch of water. A silent, desperate race against time and each other. Each man hoped, prayed, that his net would be the lucky one, that he would be the one to return with a catch worth selling. Tensions simmered just beneath the surface. Fights sometimes broke out over invisible boundaries in the sea, lines drawn not on maps, but in tradition and desperation. To trespass into another village's fishing zone was to invite curses, to risk having your nets cut in the night, or worse, to face revenge under the cover of darkness, far from the safety of shore. Yet, despite all of it, the hunger, the debt, the danger, the sea called them back. Every single morning, without fail. Because beneath the exhaustion and the fear, there was a profound beauty. A quiet, powerful rhythm that only those who truly listened could hear. It was in the way the first rays of sunlight danced and shattered on the water's surface. It was in the gentle hiss of the tide pulling back from the coral reefs. It was in the deep, contented sigh of a wooden boat settling into the waves, ready for its journey. For these fishermen, the ocean wasn't just a workplace. It was a god, a teacher, a provider, and sometimes a grave. Their families lived by that same powerful rhythm. Wives rose long before the sun, their day beginning in the dark. They would prepare food, simple but nourishing meals of roasted cassava, sweet plantains, or fragrant coconut rice, all carefully wrapped in banana leaves. They packed these small bundles and carried them to the beach, their eyes scanning the horizon, waiting for the familiar sight of their men's sails. The children had their own roles to play. They would comb the shoreline, gathering seaweed or collecting colorful shells to sell to passing traders, their small contributions vital to the family's survival. Life was simple, stripped down to its essentials, but it never, ever stood still. But even this dark beauty had a cruel side. When the Kaskazi winds blew from the northeast, cold, fierce, and relentless, the sea transformed. It became an enemy. The gentle waves swelled into monstrous walls of water. Boats that had felt so sturdy just a day before were tossed about like toys, capsizing in an instant. Nets, the product of countless hours of labor, were torn to shreds. And men simply vanished. The survivors, who managed to limp back to shore, were silent, their faces etched with a grief and terror that words could not express. They were haunted by what the waves had swallowed. Every village along the coast had its share of widows. Women who would spend the rest of their lives watching the ocean, their gazes fixed on the horizon, but never seeing their husbands again. There was a saying on the coast: the sea takes what it wants, and no man, no matter how strong, no matter how skilled or wise in the ways of the water, could bargain with it. It was an absolute power, indifferent to the lives of the men who depended on it. And still, the next morning, as the sun began its ascent once more, the same men, the survivors, would walk down to the shore. They would push their patched-up boats into the surf and head out again. Because, in the Swahili world, the sea was life. It was harsh, it was unforgiving, but it was sacred. It was said that when a fisherman died, his spirit didn't find its rest on land. It joined the tide. It became part of the ocean, its voice whispering through the waves. A silent guide, helping the next generation find their way back to shore. Every trade on earth has its rhythm, but none is as patient or as punishing as that of the fishermen. Their bodies move in sync with the ocean's moods, their minds tuned to its whispers. Long before their boats even touch the water, the day begins with drills. These aren't military exercises, but rituals born of survival. The endless repetition of skills that separate the living from the lost. Each dawn breaks with the tying of knots. Here, the old men teach the young how to tie a net that will not betray them, even when soaked, strained, or pulled by a shark. Every knot has a name, like Kamba Yamesha, the rope of life. To mistake one is to risk your future. So the drills continue, day after day, until fingers bleed and the rope feels like a part of the hand itself. This isn't just a job. It's a sacred trust passed down through generations. Then come the rowing drills, the quiet choreography of teamwork. A fishing crew is never a random gathering. Each man has a place in the boat, the nahoda or captain, the wasai dizzy, the helpers, and the mtazamoji, the watcher who reads the currents. They row not by command, but by instinct. A single nod, a slight shift of a shoulder, a faint whistle, that's all it takes to change direction. Words are too heavy for the ocean's ear. Here, understanding flows through shared experience. In these boats, a brotherhood is forged, a quiet, unspoken loyalty. Men who fish together learn to trust each other more than their own kin. They share water, exhaustion, and sometimes pure terror. When the tide turns fierce, or a storm rolls in faster than they can flee, they become one living body. One man bails water, another steadies the sail, another whispers prayers to the spirits of the sea. The Swahili call it umoja wa bahari, the unity of the sea. It isn't about simple friendship. It's about survival. A man who panics could doom them all. So the older fishermen teach calm like a sacred law. Never shout, never curse the sea, and never ever show fear in front of the younger ones. This discipline is the anchor that holds them steady against the ocean's fury. The drills extend to the shore as well. Children learn early to carry buckets of seawater up the beach, balancing them without spilling a drop. They practice weaving traps from palm fronds, learning the very shape of fish through touch. Every gesture becomes muscle memory, so that when the waves rise high, the body knows what to do even when the mind freezes in fear. It's a practical education, taught not in classrooms, but on the sand and in the surf. But this constant repetition breeds a profound silence. The fishermen speak very little. When they train, it's in murmurs, words drowned beneath the hiss of wind and surf. A newcomer might find it eerie, the way a dozen men can prepare a boat without a single shout. But among them, silence is a form of respect. Each movement is a prayer, each gesture a promise made to the sea. Of course, their brotherhood isn't always gentle. It's tested by hunger, by jealousy, and by sheer exhaustion. Sometimes, when the catches are poor, men might argue over who cast the net first, or who might have angered the spirits. But even then, the bond holds. Because, on the open water, pride means nothing. Only teamwork matters. The apprentices, usually teenage boys, are the quiet glue of every crew. They handle the menial tasks, fetching ropes, cleaning the boats, repairing leaks with resin, yet they are the true heartbeat of the trade. They learn not through words, but through observation. An elder will simply gesture to the horizon. That is the lesson. They learn when to launch by the smell of the air, and when to retreat by the taste of salt on their tongue. In the evenings, after the catch is divided, these apprentices sit near the embers of cooking fires, their hands still smelling of fish and seaweed. They speak little, but their laughter comes easily. Their bond isn't built on conversation. It's built on being present in the same silence, sharing the same fatigue. And sometimes, when the night is calm, they tell stories. Tales of ghost ships that appear at midnight, of whales that sing in human voices, of fishermen who never came back, but whose lanterns can still be seen floating beneath the waves. To an outsider, the fishermen's lives might seem monotonous. The same drills, the same horizon, day in and day out. But within that rhythm lies a quiet dignity. It is a life stripped of all illusion. Every day offers only two possible outcomes. The sea will give, or the sea will take. And so, the drills become more than just practice. They become a form of meditation. Each knot tied is a prayer for safety. Each oar stroke is a conversation with the ancestors. Each wave crossed is a reminder that humanity and nature are bound by an invisible thread. Even their festivals and days of rest revolve around this sacred bond. On certain nights, when the moon is full, the fishermen gather to honor Bahari Mama, the Mother Sea. They offer her gifts of milk, honey, and coral beads, asking for forgiveness for taking her children. The fish, this isn't just a superstition. It's a ritual of balance. To live off the sea means you must respect its moods. Without that humility, no man survives for long. The young ones might laugh quietly during these rituals, pretending not to believe. But the older men just smile. They know that in this life, faith is the only thing more reliable than the tide. As the night deepens, the rhythm of the village slows. Lanterns flicker. Waves hissed gently against the coral shore. In the distance, the sea whispers its old, familiar lullaby, constant, patient, eternal. The drills will begin again at dawn. But for now, there is peace. In their exhaustion, the fishermen find a strange kind of contentment. They don't need glory or fame, only the promise of another sunrise, because each day survived is a victory the ocean can never erase. They call themselves Wanawa Apepo, the sons of the wind. Not because they are fast or free, but because they have learned to bend without breaking. And in that bending, in that quiet submission to nature's will, lies their truest and most profound strength. The night sea is both a friend and a thief. It glimmers softly under the moon's silver hand, pretending peace, but the fishermen of the Swahili coast know its moods like an old relative who cannot be trusted. By the end of each long day, after the sails have returned home like tired wings, men gather on the sand to speak quietly about what the sea gave and what it took back. Some bring home baskets of shimmering sardines or the mighty kingfish, their scales shining like coins of light. Others return with nothing but salt on their tongues and silence in their eyes. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The Swahili fishermen learned early that the sea was not an endless well of generosity. There were years when the currents changed without warning, when fish disappeared for months. There were days when storms rolled in from the Indian Ocean, turning calm waters into spinning grey walls. And yet, even in those times, they said, *Bahari, ni mama * the sea is mother. She disciplines as much as she feeds. This phrase carried a wisdom older than any written book. To call the sea mother meant to accept that every wave was both a gift and a test. When nets tore, or when a man was lost, the elders did not speak of misfortune. They spoke of the sea reclaiming what belonged to her. Let's pause here for a moment. The ocean sighs like an ancient drumbeat, and the wind hums through the palms. fishermen's wives were part of this rhythm of loss and return. At dawn, they watched their husbands disappear over the curved edge of the sea. At dusk, they counted the sails, whispering prayers beneath their breath. If the number was short, they did not cry immediately. First, they waited for the tide to turn for sometimes. The sea returned what it had borrowed. In the quiet villages along the Swahili coast from Lamu to Kilwa, from Bagamoyo to Zanzibar, grief became a discipline of its own. Women gathered in small circles, humming low songs that balanced sorrow with faith. Each melody was a lifeline, each rhythm a small offering to keep despair from sinking them too deep. Let's pause here for a moment. The waves retreat and return, and so do our memories. The young boys who grew up beside the ocean understood these rituals long before they could name them. They watched how their fathers spoke to the sea not in command, but in respect. Before casting their nets, they would whisper small blessings or sprinkle coconut water into the waves. This wasn't magic or superstitions, simply acknowledgement. The sea had moods, and a wise man never greeted her without courtesy. When a boy finally joined his first fishing trip, it was not just work. It was an initiation. The sea would test him. The weight of the nets, the rhythm of the paddles, the nausea that came when the shore disappeared. He had to prove not only his strength, but his calm, because the sea rewarded patience more than muscle. Let's pause here for a moment. We breathe with the tide, slow and steady. Every generation passed down its stories of the sea's temperament. One tale spoke of Baharia Q, the thirsty sea that once swallowed an entire fleet after months of drought on land. Another told of Samaki wa Yusaku, the fish of the night, a creature that appeared glowing under the moonlight, and vanished before dawn, a sign of fortune or of danger, depending on who told it. These myths were not mere entertainment. They were the oral maps of emotion warnings, disguised as wonder. Through them, the sea became more than geography. It was a mirror of human struggle, full of unpredictability, reward, punishment, and forgiveness. When fishermen spoke of the sea's hunger, they were also speaking of their own. Let's pause here for a moment. The old stories drift like seaweed in our minds. And yet, there was beauty in that hardship. The fishermen's calloused hands were also artists of rhythm. Their oars struck the water in time with ancient chancework songs that kept the muscles in tune and the spirit awake. Their boats, carved from mango or embual wood, were masterpieces in their own right, each line curved with centuries of refinement. Even the nets were poems of patience, each knot tied with purpose, each repair an act of endurance. These details mattered, because the sea noticed. That was the unspoken belief. The sea rewarded care. Those who rushed their craft or neglected the small rituals often faced sudden storms or bad luck. But those who treated their work like prayer, who moved slowly, deliberately, often returned with baskets full and hearts lightened by gratitude. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire dims and the night deepens. The Swahili coast was never isolated. Long before maps and borders, these fishermen were already part of a vast oceanic conversation. Their sails crossed paths with those of Arabs from Oman, Persians from Shiraz, traders from Gujarat, and even Chinese sailors before the 15th century. The fishermen learned to read not only the wind, but the language of visitors to bargain, adapt, and survive. Yet, no matter how far the world reached into their villages, the sea remained their truest teacher. Foreign ships brought spices, beads, and stories of distant gods. But the Swahili fishermen already had their own religion of patience. Their mosque faced the ocean. Their prayers faced uncertainty, and in that space between faith and fear, they found peace. Let's pause here for a moment. The stars shimmer above, steady as hope. In time, the fishermen grew old. Their bodies bent like driftwood, their eyes faded to the color of weathered shells. But even then, the sea did not release them. They sat near the shore every evening, listening for the rhythm they once commanded, the sound of oars dipping, of sails unfurling, of laughter rising over the foam. Their sons took their places, their grandsons after them, and the sea kept whispering the same lessons in new ears. Don't chase what the tide withholds, one elder told a young fisherman. Wait, the sea always returns what is yours. Shows you why it was never meant for you. The boy nodded, but it would take years of salt, sweat, and silence to truly understand. Let's pause here for a moment. The horizon glows, and time feels circular. When the sea finally claimed a fisherman for good, the village did not say he drowned. They said, Amienda Baharini Kupumzika, he has gone to the sea to rest. His name would be whispered in the morning prayers, his boat repainted and given to his son. And in the gentle rhythm of the tide, the people believed they could still hear him laughing softly, counting fish, blessing the waves. So the sea was not merely an adversary, it was also the archive of their lives. Each ripple carried memory, each tide erased footprints, yet left behind a deeper mark, the rhythm of survival. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire fades to embers, and the ocean hums its eternal lullaby. In the end, this is what it meant to be a Swahili fisherman, to live in conversation with the unknown, to wake each morning and ask not for control, but for understanding, to fight, to fail, to forgive the sea, and then to return again. It was a quiet courage, the kind that rarely makes history books, but it built a civilization that learned to breathe with the ocean instead of against it. The sea that gave and took away became a mirror for life itself. Every fisherman knew it. There is no victory in mastery, harmony. And perhaps that is why their descendants still stand on the shore today, feeling the same pull, the same peace, the same unending conversation with the deep. The fishermen of the Swahili coast didn't just build boats, they built prayers that could float. Every single plank, each nail, each twist of rope carried a whisper of faith, a rhythm passed down from grandfather to son. Their tools were few, but each one was treated like family. The dhow that knew the wind's moods, the rope that held its breath through storms, and the oar that turned struggle into a song. They held a deep belief that before you could master the sea, you had to master the silence living inside the wood, the fiber, the stone. Because to build something that floats in a world that constantly tries to pull you down is to understand faith at its most physical, tangible level. The smell of sawdust and sea salt fills the air, and for a moment we can breathe with the rhythm of the waves. The dhow, that iconic curved vessel with its triangular Latin sail, was the crown jewel of the coast. Though small versions carried fishermen just a few miles out, its shape remained a powerful symbol of beauty and balance. Its hull, carved from strong muvial or mangrove wood, curved like the body of a whale lean, powerful and forgiving in the water. To the Swahili, a dhow had a soul. Its builder would speak to it while carving, asking it to remember courage and loyalty on the open water. Closer to shore, you'd find the smaller outrigger canoes, called engel. They skimmed across the shallows like the children of the sea swift, light and perfectly designed to glide over reefs. To an outsider, these boats might look fragile, almost flimsy. But to those who knew them, who relied on them daily, they were as dependable as the sunrise. Every piece of these vessels had a profound meaning. The outrigger beams symbolized balance in life. The sail symbolized faith in the unseen. and the paddle always carved smooth by hand symbolized endurance. There was a saying, a man could survive without shoes, but he could not survive without a paddle. The wind hums softly, and if you listen, you can hear the creak of old wood, remembering the hands of its maker. Even the ropes were sacred. They weren't mere bindings, but lifelines, connecting man and sea. Long before imported rope arrived through trade, the Swahili people made their own by twisting coconut fiber, strand by painstaking strand. Each rope had its own song, its own rhythm. Mothers and daughters would sit in courtyards under the shade of trees, rolling fiber against their thighs, weaving not just rope, but protection. They believed that a rope made with love and good intentions would never snap, no matter how rough the waves became. And so, when fishermen tied their sails or mended their nets, they would often murmur the names of their loved ones under their breath. This wasn't a superstition. It was a way of grounding themselves. Each knot became a memory, each twist a prayer. The rope coils at our feet like a sleeping snake, and the sun filters gently through the palms. Then came the hooks. Long before metal arrived from Arabia or India, fishermen carved hooks from bone smooth, curved, and surprisingly strong. They used the bones of cattle, goats, even turtles, whatever nature provided. Shaping a single hook took immense patience. It could take a full day to carve just one. The fisherman would test its curve against the palm of his hand, feeling for that invisible line between strength and cruelty. Some believed the sea could sense greed. If you carved your hook with arrogance, expecting too much from the tide, you would return with nothing. But if you carved with humility, whispering thanks before you even began, the sea would bless your hands and your line. This quiet relationship with their tools, not one of domination, but one of dialogue, defined the Swahili fisherman's world. They worked with nature, not against it. Even when they speared fish in the shallows or trapped them in coral lagoons, they took only what was needed, leaving the rest for tomorrow. The heat of the day softens, and the tide draws a silver edge along the sand. There were many techniques, but three stood above all: handline fishing, reef spearing, and the ingenious tide pool traps. Handline fishing was a pure test of patience and listening. With no rod, just a line wound around calloused fingers, the fisherman could feel every flicker beneath the surface. He could sense the difference between a curious tug and a true, committed bite. It required absolute stillness and a deep humility. Some even said that a good fisherman's heart beats in perfect rhythm with the fish he seeks. Reef spearing was for the daring. At low tide, men would wade into waist-deep water, spears in hand, their eyes trained for the flick of a silver tail under coral shadows. Every step was careful and deliberate. One wrong move could scare the catch, or worse, invite a sting from a hidden creature like a They learned the geometry of patience. How to strike not where the fish is but where it will be in the next instant. And then there were the tide pool traps, ancient, elegant inventions of stone and intuition. Fishermen arranged coral and rocks into winding, maze-like shapes along the shore. These formations would fill with water at high tide, and as the water retreated, fish would become trapped inside. There were no nets, no violence, just a profound understanding of the ocean's pulse, and the patience to wait for her to breathe out what she had taken in. We can almost hear the whisper of water retreating, leaving behind the soft shimmer of scales in the shallows. But before any of this work began, before a single sail was raised or a spear gleamed in the sun, there was ritual. The Swahili fisherman never set out without first seeking balance between the seen and the unseen worlds. At dawn, as the horizon glowed a soft pink, they would gather at the edge of the beach, barefoot in the cool sand, to offer their blessings. Sometimes they would sprinkle the very first catch of the season back into the waves, a gift to the spirits of the deep. Other times they carried water jars that had been blessed by the women of the village, filled with special herbs or coral dust to pour into the sea before departure. Each act, no matter how small, was a declaration. We remember we are guests here. The ocean receives the offering quietly, and the dawn widens its arms across the water. These rituals were not just spiritual, they were powerful psychological anchors. The fishermen faced real, life-threatening danger every single day. They had seen friends vanish beneath the waves, seen nets snap in sudden storms, and seen dhows capsized without warning. Faith was their compass. It steadied trembling hands in the face of a squall, quieted fear in the lonely dark, and kept them humble in moments of victory. When a new, young fisherman joined a crew, the elders would test him not by the strength of his muscles, but by the depth of his silence. Could he sit through the dawn prayer without fidgeting? Could he accept a bad catch without casting blame? If the answer was yes, then he was ready not to conquer the sea, but to join its conversation. And so, across countless generations, these tools, the dhow, the rope, the hook, and the prayer became more than just instruments of survival. They became symbols of continuity, living proof that faith and craftsmanship could coexist in one beautiful, harmonious rhythm. The fire crackles softly, and the sea hums its low, ancient lullaby. By midday, when the boats finally left the shore, the line between religion and work had completely disappeared. The wind carried their chants. The water carried their reflections. Even the fish-shimmering schools of them moving beneath the hulls seemed to be part of the same story, a story written anew each and every day. The tools of faith were never just about catching fish. They were about remembering that to live near the sea is to live with a sense of surrender, a surrender of defeat, but one of grace. Each pull of the oar was a prayer in motion. Each knot tied was a verse in the unending, beautiful poem of survival. As we exhale with the wind, we can feel the weight of time drifting away with the tide. Before clocks and calendars measured our days, the sea was the ultimate storyteller, a living calendar. Its moods, its colors, the very scent of its salt-laced windsall spoke a language far older than human memory. For the Swahili fishermen of the East African coast, this was a language they knew by heart. They understood its whispers of plenty and its warnings of hunger. Their seasons weren't marked in almanacs, but by the slow, silent dance of the moon across the vast, dark sky. Their most trusted companions in this conversation with the ocean were their nets, humble, heavy, and woven with infinite patience. They began as simple bundles of fiber, meticulously twisted and knotted in the cool shade while elders watched, their eyes correcting every small mistake. Each knot was like a heartbeat. A knot tied too loosely meant losing the catch. Too tightly, and the delicate mesh would tear under the strain of the sea. The net wasn't just a tool. It was a map of human rhythm. Every fisherman knew how to cast it just so, watching it open like a gentle sigh, land on the water like a whisper, and draw in whatever the sea was willing to give. In the old times, long before European imports arrived on these shores, nets were crafted from coconut husk fiber and strands of baobab bark. These materials were soaked, beaten, and dried in a long, laborious process. Later, cotton thread and eventually nylon made their way here. But even then, the men insisted on weaving the nets by hand, refusing the loud, impersonal touch of machines. They believed the sea didn't trust nets that came from noise. Only silence, they said, could weave a net that caught truth. Once ready, these nets became extensions of the men themselves. They were thrown from small, hand-carved canoes, dragged carefully along the vibrant coral reefs, or suspended between tidal rock-sitch method perfectly adapted to what the season offered. Some nets were designed to float, catching the shimmering schools of fish that swam near the surface in the soft light of dawn. Others sank deep, like woven ghosts, to trap the bottom dwellers hiding in the intricate caves of the coral gardens. Every cast was an act of profound reading, not with the eyes, but with a deep, ingrained intuition. The fishermen could feel the weight of the current through the taut rope, the softness of the sand shifting beneath their ankles, and the faint, unmistakable pull that meant a living creature had accepted its fate. To watch a skilled fisherman at work was to witness poetry in motion, a slow, deliberate dance between struggle and surrender, between human will and the ocean's grace. But long before even the most basic nets, the people built their wisdom directly into the landscape with stone traps. These were coral labyrinths, graceful, crescent-shaped walls stretching from the beach out into the shallow water. When the tide rose, fish would follow the current in, swimming over the low walls. When the tide fell, they found themselves gently stranded in calm, shallow pools. It was a system built not on force, but on immense patience, letting nature do the work. The fishermen would walk the traps in the quiet morning light, spears in hand, carefully selecting their catch from pools that glimmered like scattered mirrors under the sun. No two traps were ever identical. Each family had its own unique design, passed down through generations, some shaped like hooks, others like spirals or moons. Children learned their clan's trap by walking its curve barefoot at low tide, memorizing the feel of every rock and crevice. Ownership wasn't marked by fences or signs, but by a shared understanding. To know your trap was to know your place in the world. And yet, it wasn't always peace and tranquility beneath the swaying palms. The sea was generous, but she could also be jealous. When the catches were meager or sudden storms ripped the precious nets, tensions would rise. Rival fishing crews might accuse each other of crossing invisible lines, the ancient, unwritten boundaries of fishing zones known to each village. Sometimes these disputes ended with shared laughter and a shrug, but other times they ended with spears raised and tempers burning like the midday sun. This was why every community had an elder of the Tida, respected man who held the stories of every reef and sandbank in his memory. He would mediate the disputes, reminding both sides of the ultimate truth. The sea belongs to no one, and to everyone. To hoard her gifts was to invite her anger. Many old fishermen swore they had seen the sea itself turn violent after men fought upon her shore, as if she were punishing their greed with her own immense wrath. Moonlight was their true clock. The fishermen knew that the tides followed the moon's quiet, inexorable pull, and so their lives moved in perfect harmony with its cycles. The full moon was a time of bright, silvered water and active fish, perfect for night fishing. When the lantern light made the fish scales sparkle like fallen stars, the new moon, in contrast, brought the darkest waters. A time when only the most skilled and experienced sailors could navigate the reefs without danger. They named their months after these cycles: Moisiwa, Samakitha, moon of fish; Moisiwa, Apepo, Makali, the moon of fierce winds. Every household marked these changes with songs. Women sang lullabies that mimicked the rhythm of the tides, and children learned to count by watching the moon wax and wane. Their entire calendar lived in the sky, perfectly reflected on the water's surface. The seasons meant everything, not just for the fish, but for the human spirit. When the Kaskazi winds blew gently from the northeast in December, the sea grew calm and friendly, guiding the majestic dhows north toward Arabia and trade. But when the powerful Kuzi winds arrived from the south around June, storms brewed on the horizon, and fishermen stayed close to the safety of the shore. In this rhythm, people found both their wealth and their warnings. A good season could feed an entire town for months. A bad one could bring hunger to every home. Through all this unpredictability, the Swahili fishermen carried a serene, almost sacred patience. They had learned to surrender without despair, to accept that not every day was meant for catching, and not every tide was meant for sailing. There was a saying, "When the sea sleeps, we rest beside her. When she wakes, we follow." This wasn't fatalism. It was a profound wisdom, born from a lifetime of listening to the ocean. Even within the hardship, there was a quiet beauty, the small, wordless companionship of shared labor. When the catch came in heavy, laughter echoed across the beach as the community gathered. When the nets came in empty, the men would simply share roasted cassava and a comfortable silence, knowing tomorrow was another day. It was said that friendship among fishermen was like the tide, it always returned, even after it went out. The children helped, they carried small baskets of fish, fetched water for cleaning, and learned the ancient craft simply by watching and imitating their fathers and grandfathers. Elders often joked that a child born near the sea learned to swim before he learned to walk. And in truth, many did. The ocean was their playground, their first teacher, and their first real test of courage. By night, as the boats returned, the village came alive with the comforting smells of salt and cooking fires. The fishermen would lay out their catch beneath flickering lantern light, counting what the sea had given them. The old men would recite proverbs, their voices carrying the weight of generations. The sea gives to those who wait. The tide forgets no promise. These weren't just poetic sayings. They were vital reminders of balance, humility, and gratitude. And as the nets were hung to dry, swaying gently in the evening breeze, the women would walk among them, sprinkling fresh water from gourds. It was a quiet blessing, a simple ritual to ensure that tomorrow's tide would bring more. For these communities, fishing was never just about survival. It was a ceremony, a rhythm of repetition and respect, a sacred conversation passed down through generations like an unbroken wave. The nets, the stone traps, the moons, and the seasons all formed one great dialogue, a conversation between humans and the sea, between patience and hunger, between taking and giving thanks. It was never about conquest. It was always about harmony, about remembering that every meal of fish was a gift, a moment borrowed from something far larger and older than ourselves. Beneath the blazing East African sun, the smell of salt and smoke mixes with the sea breeze. Along the Swahili coast, fish weren't just food, they were currency, heritage, and survival. The fishermen had no gold mines or ivory caravans, but they had the ocean, a vast, shimmering vault that rewarded patience far more than greed. Their mornings began with quiet barter, their evenings with the slow rhythm of trade. And for those who lived by the tide, every scaled body of fish was a story waiting to be sold. The process was simple, yet sacred. Once caught, the fish were split open, salted with coarse crystals gathered from mangrove flats, and laid to dry under the watchful gaze of seabirds. The women, often the backbone of this trade, knew exactly when to turn each piece, when to shade it, and when the salt had sunk deep enough to preserve it against the rot of humidity. Their hands, roughened by work, moved with an unshakable confidence. In the quiet moments, they sang soft coastal hymns in Swahili, songs that spoke of patience, the sea's temper, and the hope that tomorrow's tide would be kind. These preserved fish, light and fragrant, could last for months. They were packed into palm leaf baskets and carried by donkeys, women, or hired porters through narrow coralstone alleys, where the scent of spice and sea filled the air. The journey inland was long and grueling through thorny savannas, across floodplains, and into towns where people had never seen the ocean but depended on it daily. For those inland traders, a salted fish was more than a meal. It was a taste of the coaster promise that the world was wider than their fields and forests. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The fisherman's world was small, yet somehow it stretched across oceans. In the bustling ports of Kilwa, Mombasa, and Pate, markets buzzed with motion. Swahili traders negotiated in Arabic, Persian, and Gujarati. Wooden crates from Arabia carried cloth, incense, and glass beads. In return, they were filled with fish, coconuts, and mangrove timber. It was a living rhythm, salt from the flats, fish from the reefs, wood from the forests, gold from the hinterlands. And through it all moved the humble fisherman's catch, bridging continents in silence. The trade was a careful balance of timing and trust. Too much salt, and the fish turned brittle. Too little, and they spoiled before reaching the next port. In a world without refrigeration, preservation was an art, and the women who managed it were master artists. They turned coastal abundance into currency, transforming the fleeting into the enduring. For the Swahili coast, trade was not just survival, it was identity. Each port town was a mixture of faces, faiths, and languages. Mosques rose beside boatyards. Quranic schools shared alleys with rope makers and fishmongers. Here, the fisherman and the scholar might live side by side, united by the same salty air and the same rhythmic call to prayer. Even the smallest boy who carried a basket of dried fish to market was part of something vaster, centuries old, web of exchange that stretched from the Red Sea to Madagascar. The merchants who arrived by Tau looked at the coast with admiration. They marveled at how the Swahili could read the monsoon winds as if they were written in scripture. They respected the traders who negotiated calmly beneath palm frond shelters, their ledgers written in Arabic script. But behind every polished merchant stood an unseen army of fishermen, women, and children who made the trade possible, each one a small cog in the great wheel of coastal life. Inland, the arrival of the fish markets was an event. Traders would spread woven mats on the ground, their baskets open, releasing a salty aroma that mingled with dust and goat milk. Women in headscarves haggled for pieces to carry home. Some fish were boiled into stews with tamarind and millet. Others were ground into powder to flavor soups. A man could eat the ocean without ever seeing it. This connection, invisible yet powerful, tied the coast to the savannah, the dhow to the donkey cart, the wave to the whispering wind over acacia trees. The fishing families became silent aristocrats of the coast. While others measured wealth in gold or cattle, they measured it in networks. Who they knew in Kilwa, who could guarantee safe passage across pirate-filled waters, which family in Zanzibar had the best salt pans. A great fisherman was not only skilled with the net, he was wise in trade, able to turn hardship into abundance. Some even sent their sons to study writing and arithmetic so they could read the letters of merchants from Arabia and India. Knowledge became part of the trade, just as valuable as the fish themselves. Let's pause here again. The night deepens, and the fishermen's torches flicker across the beach. Their boats creak softly, tied to the pulse of the tide. During the high season, the coast was alive with sound. Hammering from boatyards, laughter from markets, chanting from prayer, calls all blending into a rhythm that defined life. But when the monsoon winds reversed and trade slowed, the villagers turned inward. Fishermen repaired their nets. Women mended the walls of their coral houses. Elders told stories about the old days, when the first dhows came from Oman, when the Prophet's name was first whispered on the Swahili breeze. In those quiet months, fishing and faith intertwined, they prayed for calm seas, for the safe return of boats, for sons lost to the storm. The ocean gave, but it also took hand. Every family had its tales of those who never came back. Yet, in the same breath, the elders spoke of fortune, of a giant tuna caught by moonlight, or of a trade that brought prosperity for a season. Hope and grief lived side by side, bound by salt water. To understand the Swahili, one must understand their relationship with trade. It was not greed that drove them, but balance baraka, the blessing of honest work and fair exchange. They saw trade not as conquest, but as communion. Each transaction was a small act of trust, a handshake across cultures and tides, and in that handshake lay the true wealth of the coast, not in gold or coral palaces, but in human connection. In time, trade reshaped everything: language, architecture, even faith. Persian words entered Kiswahili. Arab designs shaped coral stone doorways. The ocean's bounty built mosques, whose minarets still stand today, silent witnesses to centuries of exchange. When Portuguese ships arrived in the 15th century, they found not an isolated shore, but a chain of cities, thriving on maritime commerce, cities that had already mapped their place in the world. But even then, the fishermen remained grounded. Empires rose and fell, but the tide kept its rhythm. They still launched their boats at dawn, still salted the fish, still told stories under the moon. Because, for the Swahili fisherman, wealth was never in the coin, it was in the continuity of tradition, in knowing that his labor fed not just his family, but an entire civilization. Let's pause once more. The fire burns low now. You can almost hear the distant lapping of waves against a dhow's wooden hull. In that sound lives the echo of 1,000 untold journeys, each one born from a single cast of a net. The Swahili coast remains a living archive of that rhythm, the smell of fish, the whisper of sails, the prayers before dawn. Beneath every coral wall and market stall, the ghosts of fishermen linger, their legacy salted into the stones themselves. And though their names may be forgotten, their labor shaped a world that still endures. For when the tide retreats and the beach falls silent, what remains is more than footprints or fish bones. What remains is the heartbeat of a people who turned hardship into beauty and survival into song. Imagine a world without clocks, without calendars, a world where time isn't measured in minutes or hours, but in the rise and fall of the ocean tide, the song of a distant bird, the whisper of the wind through palm trees. This was the world of the Swahili coast. For generations, fishermen here learned to read the sea not as a resource to be conquered, but as an elder to be respected. They listened patiently, attentively, almost reverently. They knew the winds, the Kaskazi and the Kusi, as if they were family. The Kaskazi, blowing gently from the northeast, brought calmer waters and schools of sardines, perfect for sailing their dhows far out into the open sea. Then came the Kusi, a more boisterous sibling from the southeast. It brought rougher waves and storms, but it also pushed fish into the shallow reefs, where they could be caught with carefully placed nets and traps. Time for these coastal communities wasn't a number on a clock face. It was a collection of signs, the darting flight of terns, the shimmering glow of bioluminescent plankton painting the water at night, the precise angle of sunlight as it struck the sea's surface. Every ripple told a story, a secret whispered from the deep about where fish might be gathering, or where the coral reefs would soon bloom with life. The annual coral spawning was an event anticipated like a great festival, its timing memorized over decades of observation. a sacred knowledge passed from father to son, from mother to daughter. These communities were the original marine ecologists. Their understanding wasn't written in textbooks. It was empirical, intuitive, and proven by generations of trial, error, and quiet observation. As dawn broke, casting a soft, golden light across the water, the small dhows would drift into position. Their sails would unfurl like the white wings of a great bird catching the morning breeze. The fishermen's eyes weren't just on the water below, but on the sky above. They watched the patterns of seabirds with intense focus. A group of gulls hovering in one spot meant baitfish were schooling just beneath the surface. Terns diving in sharp, precise arcs pointed to a different kind of opportunity. Even a hawk swooping inland could signal that a particular shoal had been spotted from high above. A shadow moving across the waves might indicate a predator, or an unusual current that could either help or hinder their efforts. Nothing was random. To them, the ocean spoke a language, and those who listened, who truly understood, were the ones who thrived. The sea's calendar dictated everything. It determined not just when to fish for survival, but when to rest, when to mend nets, and when to hold feasts to celebrate the ocean's generosity and ensure harmony within the community. Let's just pause here for a moment. Imagine yourself on that coast. The fire crackles softly beside you, and as we rest beneath a canopy of brilliant stars, you can almost hear it. The gentle lap of waves against the coral, a rhythm that feels older than memory itself, a timeless pulse connecting us to the very beginning. The fishermen of the Swahili coast understood a truth that we are only now relearning: balance. They knew that if they cast too many hooks or set too many traps, the reefs would suffer and the fish would disappear. But if they caught too few, their families would go hungry. It was a delicate, constant dance. This knowledge of seasonal fish migrations became sacred, almost mystical. Certain species, like the powerful queenfish or the swift tuna, would only appear in specific months. Tracking their arrival required a masterful observation of wind shifts, the phases of the moon, and even subtle changes in ocean temperature that most would never notice. The elders became the keepers of this natural calendar, translating nature's complex patterns into a sustainable livelihood for their people. In quiet lessons, taught by the flickering light of lanterns, they would tell the young, "The sea is generous, but she has her calendar. If you break it, she will correct you." This was a quiet science, precise and effective, yet never recorded in formal texts. The Swahili fishermen had their own sophisticated methods of prediction. They would drop lines into the water at different depths to feel for temperature changes, a sign that different currents were meeting. They would listen for the distant calls of migrating fish, a sound carried through the water. They read the currents and eddies on the ocean's surface like letters on ancient parchment. Their observations went beyond just the fish. They studied the coral itself, the angles of its branches, the types of algae growing on it, even the tiny crabs that scuttled across its surface, as each was a sign of the water's health. Every small detail, every observation, was a piece of a puzzle, contributing to a collective wisdom that ensured the survival and prosperity of their communities for centuries. This wisdom wasn't locked away. It was woven into the fabric of daily life. At low tide, the elders would hold councils on the exposed sandbars, mapping out which areas of the reef should be fished that day, which nets needed mending, and which zones should be left to rest and recover for the next season. This knowledge was also encoded in songs and chants. The lyrics were not just art, they were powerful mnemonic devices, helping to pass down the collective memory of generations. Children learned from a young age to recognize the subtle shifts in the tide or the unique behavior of a shoal of fish. They were learning the unseen hand of ecology, not from a book, but through direct, lived experience. To truly understand the Swahili people, you have to see that fishing was never just about survival. It was a conversation with the ocean, a partnership built on respect, not a relationship of dominion. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the dhows would cast off, their sails taut, gliding gracefully into the vast blue horizon with their nets neatly coiled on deck. The crew didn't rely on charts or modern instruments. They relied on intuition, an inner compass honed over decades of meticulous observation and guided by a powerful, inherited memory. The currents, winds, and tides were their scriptures, read with deep understanding. A single mistake missed, judging a tide, neglecting a warning sign from the reef. Casting a net too hastily could mean the difference between a feast for the village and a period of famine. And yet, they persevered, day after day, bound by this shared rhythm, by their mutual respect for the sea, and by the quiet, profound beauty of knowing the ocean as intimately as the lines on their own palms. By the time evening arrived, the focus of the work shifted from the water back to the community on shore. The day's catch was unloaded, cleaned, salted, and laid out to dry under the fading sun. But just as importantly, the day's lessons were recorded and shared not in ledgers, but orally, through songs, stories, and apprenticeships where the young learned directly from the old. This cycle of observation, action, and reflection was continuous, its echoes reverberating through the generations. The sea's calendar was never a static document. It was a living, breathing guide, constantly reminding each fisherman that their individual labor was deeply intertwined with forces far greater than themselves. Let's pause again. The moon is rising now, a silver disk over the horizon. It illuminates the silent, anchored boats and the quiet reefs. If you listen closely, you can hear the ocean humming its eternal, peaceful lullaby. This is how the Swahili coast endured. The fisherman's knowledge, encoded in rhythm and song, ensured that the ocean's bounty was neither squandered nor forgotten. They lived their lives as attentive, lifelong students of nature, carefully recording every migration, every storm, every subtle change in the water and the wind. Each observation was another thread woven into a magnificent tapestry that connected generations to one another, to the sea that sustained them, and to the future they were building. By living in deep harmony with the calendar of the tides, the Swahili people preserved not only their livelihoods, but also their rich culture, powerful and enduring, testament to the timeless wisdom of the coast. Along the East African coast, the sea was never simply water and waves. To the Swahili people, it was a living being, a powerful entity with its own moods, memories, and spirit. For the fishermen who made their living from its depths, the the sea spirits, were as real as the salt in the breeze and the sun on their skin. These spirits weren't just folklore. They were guardians and arbiters of the ocean, entities that demanded respect, humility, and careful, time-honored ritual. Before the first net was ever cast into the turquoise waters, before the outrigger canoe slipped from the sand to meet the tide, a quiet conversation with the unseen would begin. Offerings were made. A few coins, a handful of lustrous shells, or even a small portion of the previous day's catch would be left at sacred stones that dotted the shoreline. As dawn painted the sky, you'd see the soft flicker of candles in miniature shrines nestled along the beaches, their smoke spiraling upward, mingling with the morning mist. The elders, their voices a low, rhythmic hum, would whisper prayers into the wind, invoking protection, asking for favor, and seeking safe passage on the vast, unpredictable expanse. The fishermen approached their work with a unique blend of skill and reverence. They understood that the ocean was generous, but it could also be capricious. A single, careless word, a hasty, disrespectful movement, these could be enough to invite storms, or return them to shore with empty nets. It was believed that the *Majini* patrolled the vibrant coral reefs, guiding the bounty of the sea toward those who showed respect and punishing those who did not. Some spirits were thought to be playful, almost mischievous, delighting in guiding schools of fish directly into the nets of a fisherman who had pleased them. Others were fierce and territorial, capable of summoning sudden squalls or treacherous tides to drive away those who angered them. Over generations, this deep understanding gave rise to a rich tapestry of rituals. A specific chant before leaving the shore, a quiet blessing whispered over the fishing line, a sprinkle of seawater over the bow of the canoe. Each act was a carefully honed gesture of appeasement, a profound acknowledgement that humans were merely visitors in a realm far older than memory. These rites were not performed in isolation. They were communal, binding the fishermen not just to the sea, but to each other and to the ancestors who first learned to read its intricate signs. In the quiet coastal villages, as the day's work ended, elders would gather the young and recount stories passed down through the ages. Tales of fishermen saved by heeding omens, the specific cry of a seabird, the unusual shimmer of a distant wave, a sudden, unexpected shift in the breeze. The lessons woven into these stories were subtle yet enduring. Humility, patience, and unwavering attentiveness were just as crucial as physical strength or technical skill. Apprentices learned from a young age to move with quiet grace, to speak softly, and never, ever to dismiss the whispers of the wind or the murmurs of the water. A day on the ocean wasn't just about fishing. It was a conversation with the unseen, a delicate negotiation that balanced survival with a deep, abiding respect. Let's pause here for a moment. Imagine the fire crackling softly on the beach, the air thick with the smell of salt and wood smoke. The sea itself hums a quiet, rhythmic tune, as if it's listening to every whispered word, every silent offering. The fishermen also marked sacred spots, places of particular power along the reefs and in the tidal pools. Certain unique coral formations or clusters of iridescent shells were considered the dwellings of the *Majini*. These areas were off-limits. No net could be cast there, no trap set. To break this taboo was more than just disrespectful, it was dangerous. Stories circulated widely of the consequences. Sudden, violent storms appearing out of clear skies, boats capsizing for no reason, and the complete disappearance of fish from the area for weeks. Phantom lights were said to have appeared on the water, and mysterious gusts of wind would warn intruders away. Through these powerful stories, a crucial form of ecological wisdom was encoded. They were, in essence, a spiritual guide to sustainable fishing, shaping human behavior to protect the delicate balance of the marine ecosystem itself. This spiritual dimension of their work extended far beyond immediate survival. The fishermen believed that the sea remembered. It remembered those who treated it with kindness and respect, and it would return that abundance to their families, season after season. Offerings weren't just made for safety at sea. They were made to ensure prosperity in the markets, a blessing that allowed entire communities to thrive. This shared reverence for the *Majini* also maintained a natural harmony between neighboring fishing groups. Because sacred spaces were shared, they required cooperation and a common adherence to the rules. A fisherman's success, therefore, was completely inseparable from the social harmony of his village and the ecological stewardship of his environment. And the children, They learned these profound lessons from the very beginning. Long before they ever touched a fishing line or paddled a canoe, they were silent observers. They watched the elders with wide eyes, the precise placement of offerings, the gentle recitation of ancient chants, the careful, patient measurement of the tides. The lessons were embedded in everything. Songs carried encoded instructions, their rhythms mimicking the motion of the waves or the darting movements of fish. Even their play was a form of practice. They'd cast small woven nets into the tidal pools, leave miniature offerings of their own, and mimic the soft-spoken prayers of their fathers and grandfathers. By participating in these small ways, the young were being gently introduced to the sacred dialogue between their people and the ocean, a conversation that had shaped their livelihoods and communities for centuries. Over time, these rituals became so deeply woven into the fabric of daily life that they were inseparable from the work itself. Even the most seasoned, silver-haired fishermen continued to speak softly to the waves as they worked. They'd still make a small, almost unconscious gesture of respect before casting their nets. And they would always return to shore with a sense of care, never taking more than what was needed. There was a profound, unspoken understanding that human hands were temporary, but the Magini, the reefs, and the tides were eternal. In this world, respect and humility were just as essential as the hard, physical labor of hauling nets and rowing canoes against the current. Let's pause again. The ocean breathes a slow, deep rhythm. The night air carries the scent of salt and sacred smoke from the shoreline shrines. If you listen closely, you can almost feel the steady heartbeat of generations who listened to this same ocean song long before us. Through these sacred practices, the Swahili coast developed a profound and intricate ecological understanding. The patterns of the seasonal winds, the complex migrations of different fish species, the life cycles of the coral reefs, all of this was mapped not with modern instruments, but with ritual, with keen observation, and with a collective memory passed down through generations. The Magini, though unseen, served as the spiritual enforcers of what we would today call sustainable practices. Their presence reinforced the essential rules. Do not overfish, do not disturb the breeding grounds, and always treat the sea with reverence. Here, spirituality and ecology were not separate fields. They were intertwined, a single, unified worldview that ensured communities could live in harmony with the ocean rather than in opposition to it. And so, as the deep night finally gives way to the first light of dawn, the rituals conclude, offerings are collected, final prayers are whispered, and the canoes glide silently from the shore into the open water. The fishermen know they are not alone. The spirits of the deep remain watching, guiding, and reminding each person of their small but significant place in the vast, living tapestry of the ocean. This powerful connection, spiritual, cultural, and practical, is what preserves the timeless wisdom of the Swahili coast, a precious legacy passed down through centuries. The sea, in all its moods and all its mysteries, is both their teacher and their companion, and those who continue to honor it find themselves living in perfect harmony with its eternal rhythm. As the tides ebb and flow along the Swahili coast, the lessons of centuries-old fishermen persist, reaching into the present with quiet insistence. These men and women, who once relied solely on intuition, chance, and the guidance of spirits they called the Magini, built a knowledge system that mirrors what modern science now studies with instruments and charts. They knew the cycles of fish migration, the spawning rhythms of coral, and the signs of approaching storms, all encoded in memory, story, and ritual. Today, marine biologists working along the East African coast often collaborate with local elders. Recognizing that these oral histories contain invaluable data, the fishermen's observations of tides, currents, and seasonal abundance inform sustainable practices guiding reef preservation and fishing quotas. Here, at the crossroads of respect for the ocean, ancient wisdom and modern research meet. You can see students gathering along sandy shores to learn about tidal patterns and ecological stewardship, translating traditional knowledge into the language of contemporary conservation. The fishermen's rituals, once viewed as purely spiritual acts, now appear as ecological insights encoded in performance. The offerings made to the Magi, the timing of voyages according to the phases of the moon, and the careful observation of seabirds and water movement, all of it reflects a deep, intuitive understanding of natural cycles. By adhering to these practices, Swahili communities maintained the delicate balance of their coastal ecosystems for generations. The ocean, revered as a living entity, responded not only to the skill of human hands, but also to the humility with which they approached it. Let's just pause here for a moment. Imagine the scene. The fire crackles softly, and the wind carries the scent of salt and damp coral. Picture the rhythmic lapping of waves against the shore, the soft patter of footsteps on the sand, and the quiet lessons taught over countless years, passed from one generation to the next. This continuity between past and present is tangible. Families who once depended on daily catches for survival now witness the fragility of their marine environment under the pressures of climate change and overfishing. And so they turn to the old ways for guidance, respecting no-take zones where fish can replenish, monitoring spawning seasons, and ensuring that their fishing practices don't exhaust the local stocks. In a sense, the Magi are still watching, reminding each generation that the ocean's generosity is not infinite. The communal aspect of fishing, once reinforced by ritual and superstition, continues to protect social cohesion. Shared fishing grounds are managed collectively, with knowledge of safe and sustainable practices circulating throughout the village. Stories of past failures, of devastating storms, empty nets, and disrespected Magi are recounted not to scare, but to teach caution and mindfulness. In doing so, the wisdom of the sea becomes a moral guide as much as a practical one, shaping both ethics and livelihood. Even the youngest members of these coastal communities are taught that the ocean is not merely a resource, but a teacher. Through school programs and informal mentoring from their elders, children learn to observe the currents, read the behavior of fish and birds, and measure environmental changes with a knowing eye. These lessons echo the rhythms of the past: patience, attentiveness, and a deep, profound respect for life that exists beyond human control. Each generation internalizes these practices, ensuring that the coast continues to thrive, both culturally and ecologically. Modern fishermen also draw inspiration from the spiritual dimension of their ancestors' practices. Though many may no longer perform the full range of rituals, the core concept of respect for the sea persists. It informs their ethical decisions, not taking more than is needed, leaving marine sanctuaries undisturbed, and, most importantly, passing this knowledge on to the next generation. These behaviors, encoded in tradition, become tangible contributions to sustainability, beautifully blending cultural heritage with environmental stewardship. As the sun dips toward the horizon, the Swahili coast hums with this quiet continuity. Canoes return from the day's work, their nets emptied and offerings are renewed. Children mimic the chants and gestures of their elders, perhaps unaware that these simple acts contain centuries of ecological insight. The fishermen reflect on the lessons they carry forward: patience, observation, humility, and the importance of living in harmony with forces greater than themselves. Let's pause again. Feel the rhythm of the waves, the whisper of the wind through the coconut palms, the distant laughter of children learning age-old ways. The ocean continues, vast and eternal, and those who respect it learn to navigate not only its tides, but life itself. The legacy of the Swahili fisherman illustrates a fundamental truth. Human knowledge is most powerful when it is intertwined with reverence for the natural world. By honoring the Majini and understanding the rhythms of the sea, these communities ensured their own survival and the health of their environment for centuries. Today, scientists, students, and local elders work side by side, translating these ancient insights into modern conservation strategies. The past informs the present, guiding practices that sustain fish populations, protect coral reefs, and support coastal societies. As night falls once more along the coast, the enduring lessons of the Swahili fishermen remain. Watch, listen, respect, and act with care. The tides carry memory, the reefs carry wisdom, and the ocean continues to teach those who are willing to learn. The stories of the past are alive in the hands, eyes, and hearts of today's communities, ensuring that the delicate balance between humanity and the sea endures for generations to come. Starter video. Hello and welcome back. Last time, we journeyed through the bustling markets and grand stone houses of the Swahili coast, where the scent of spices and the echoes of distant trade routes filled the air. We saw how this civilization was built on a foundation of commerce, a vibrant fusion of cultures from across the Indian Ocean. But beyond the public squares and the harbor fronts, there existed another world, one intimately tied to the very pulse of the ocean itself. Today, we're going to venture into that world, to explore the deep-rooted traditions of the Swahili fishing clans who held dominion over these sun-scorched waters. Along this shimmering coastline, certain families were not just masters of their craft. They were custodians of the sea's deepest secrets. For generations, they passed down more than just the skill of casting a net or navigating by the stars. They passed down an entire library of oceanic knowledge, the hidden currents that guided shoals of shimmering mackerel, the subtle, almost imperceptible patterns of the tides, and the precise timing of seasonal migrations that brought bounty to their shores. These clans weren't just fishing, they were living in a constant, dynamic conversation with the ocean. They maintained control over prime fishing grounds, not through force, but through a delicate balance of careful stewardship and quiet diplomacy with their neighbors. They understood a fundamental truth. The health of their community was inextricably linked to the health of the ocean. This wasn't about exploitation. It was about symbiosis, ensuring that both the people and the sea could thrive in a state of mutual respect and balance. It was a legacy written not in stone, but on the surface of the water, a story retold with every sunrise. Within these tight-knit families, children learned the rhythm of the waves before they could even walk properly. Their earliest memories were of salt spray on their faces and the gentle rocking of a dhow. There were no formal lessons or classrooms. Instead, boys and girls alike became apprentices in a silent pact of observation and absorption. They shadowed their parents and elders on the water, their young eyes soaking in every detail. They learned the intricate art of knot tying, the subtle behaviors of different fish, and the complex cartography of the coral reefs that lay just beneath the waves. This wasn't just practical knowledge. It was a family treasure, a collection of secrets that gave them their edge. Knowledge of hidden reef passages that offered safe harbor during a sudden squall, the locations of tidal pools teeming with life, and the ability to read the sky and the water for signs of changing weather. These were whispered. In quiet moments, beside the crackling evening fires, passed from one generation to the next. These skills were jealously guarded, not out of selfishness, but out of a sense of duty to preserve the clan's advantage and ensure its survival. The sea provided, but only to those who knew how to ask. But the lineage of the net was about more than just skill. It was a sacred duty, a spiritual covenant. Each morning, before the dhows set out, families would gather on the shore to perform blessings over their nets. They would burn incense, its fragrant smoke curling into the dawn air, invoking ancestral spirits, the Magi, to watch over them and grant a bountiful catch. This daily ritual was a powerful reminder of their core belief. The ocean's generosity was intertwined with respect. Take care of the sea, they taught their children, and it will care for you in return. Young apprentices watched these rituals with wide-eyed reverence. They were learning a profound lesson that extended far beyond the mechanics of fishing. They were learning that true mastery of their craft required both hands and heart, a combination of practical skill and deep spiritual attentiveness. They understood that the net was not just a tool, but a connection to their ancestors, to the spirits of the ocean, and to the very lifeblood of their community. This holistic approach, blending the physical and the spiritual, was the bedrock of their enduring success. Life in these coastal villages was marked by traditions that reinforced this deep connection to the sea and to family lineage. A major rite of passage was the ceremonial launch of a new dhow. These weren't just boats. They were works of art, living symbols of the family's history and hopes. They were often adorned with beautifully carved figureheads, sometimes representing revered ancestors, other times depicting protective spirits meant to guide the vessel safely through its voyages. The entire village would gather for these launches, the air filled with celebration and a shared sense of pride. It was a communal acknowledgement that the hands guiding this new boat were part of a much larger story, a living lineage stretching back through time. Every single act of maintenance, every rope carefully coiled, every sail meticulously mended, every net patiently repaired was seen as a thread being woven into the ongoing tapestry of the clan's history. The ocean, in this way, became more than just a workplace. It was a living archive, its tides carrying the collective memory and identity of generations. Of course, life wasn't always perfectly harmonious. With resources as valuable as these, conflicts over fishing rights would inevitably arise. But the elite families, the keepers of the deepest knowledge, typically managed these disputes, not with aggression, but with skilled diplomacy and negotiation. They held a long-term perspective, recognizing that while reckless competition might bring short-term gain, it risked the depletion of the very waters that sustained everyone. Cooperation, they knew, was the true key to survival. Even in competition, the underlying rhythms of respect and caution were paramount. These values were reinforced daily. As evening fell and the dhows returned to shore, families would gather around their fires. The smell of salt and smoke would mix with the aroma of grilling fish. They would recount the day's events, praising a particularly skillful cast or a wise decision made at sea. And, most importantly, the elders would use these stories to remind the youth of the values that kept their lineage strong. Respect for the ocean, respect for their elders, and a deep understanding of their sacred responsibility. Let's pause here. Imagine it. The fire crackles softly, casting a warm glow on the faces of young and old. The scent of salt and smoke hangs in the air. As we sit here, in this moment of quiet reflection, we can almost feel the weight of this knowledge, this heritage carried from parent to child, from wave to wave, from one generation to the next. It bears a powerful testament to a way of life lived in perfect harmony with the natural world. Welcome back to our journey along the Swahili coast. In our last episode, we dove deep into the daily lives of the fishermen, exploring their intricate dance with the tides and their mastery of the reefs. But the story of the sea doesn't end with the daily catch. For some, the ocean offered more than just sustenance. It was a pathway to power, influence, and a unique form of nobility. Today, we explore how certain families rose from the ranks of fishermen to become the esteemed patrons of the coast. Imagine a world where your wealth isn't counted in gold coins, but in the number of dhows you command, the vastness of the fishing grounds you control, and the respect you hold within your community. This was the reality for the Swahili maritime elite. These weren't kings or sultans in the traditional sense, but their influence was just as profound. They were the masters of the sea, and their fleets were the lifeblood of the coastal economy. Picture a prominent trader standing on a stone harbor dock in the soft light of early morning. The sun glints off the calm water, illuminating a row of magnificent dhows, their sails neatly furled, waiting for the day's command. In his hand, he holds not a scepter, but a ledger, and notes scribbled on palm leaves, the tools of his trade. He isn't just counting fish. He's calculating voyages, planning trade routes, and securing the prosperity of his entire village. These families commanded immense respect, not just from their own people, but from neighboring communities and even the powerful local rulers who governed the land. Their wealth was tangible, seen in the bountiful catches that fed the villages, but their true power was more subtle. It was the ability to mediate disputes, to provide for everyone during lean seasons when the fish were scarce, and the honor of sponsoring the construction of mosques and vital public works that served the entire community. Their influence was woven into the very fabric of society. This elevated status came with a responsibility to act as patrons, not just for their own kin, but for the wider coastal network. They were the key facilitators of a vibrant, interconnected world. These nobles formed strategic alliances with other powerful families up and down the coast, creating a web of trust and mutual benefit that stretched for hundreds of miles. They were the crucial link between the local economy and the vast trade routes of the Indian Ocean. When merchants arrived from distant lands like Arabia, Persia, and India, it was these families they sought out. They would negotiate the exchange of local goods, not just fish, but ivory, timber, and spices from the interior for foreign treasures like porcelain, textiles, and metals. They ensured their communities were not isolated outposts, but bustling hubs in a global network of commerce. And let's be clear, this was not an exclusively male domain. The women in these prominent families were formidable figures in their own right. While the men were at sea, the women were the pillars of the onshore economy. They managed the bustling local markets with sharp business acumen, oversaw the crucial process of preserving the catch through salting and drying, and negotiated sales with a skill and authority that was widely respected. They were the anchors of the family's commercial empire, ensuring that the wealth generated by the sea was managed wisely and multiplied on land. So, how did one achieve this esteemed status? It wasn't simply inherited, it had to be earned, generation after generation, through a delicate balance of qualities. It required immense courage at sea, the willingness to face unpredictable storms and navigate treacherous waters. It demanded prudence in commerce, the wisdom to make smart investments and build a reputation for fairness. And, perhaps most importantly, it required a deep and unwavering adherence to ancestral values of community, responsibility, and respect for the natural world. Status was a reflection of character, proven through action both on the water and within the society. The role of these noble families extended far beyond the realm of trade and economics. They were the cultural and spiritual custodians of their communities. Understanding that a strong, cohesive society was the foundation of their own influence, they invested heavily in its well-being. This concept of patronage was central to their identity. They funded the construction of beautiful mosques, with their intricate coral stone architecture and carved wooden doors, which became the spiritual heart of the villages. They supported the maintenance of sacred shrines and tombs of ancestors, reinforcing the community's connection to its past. They also established schools, or madrasas, where children learned not only the Quran but also literacy, mathematics, and the ethics of their society. By sponsoring these institutions, the nobles weren't just displaying their wealth. They were actively nurturing the social bonds and shared values that held their world together. This patronage also involved a careful preservation of tradition. While they were innovators in trade, they understood the importance of the old ways. They made sure that the deep knowledge of fishing, navigation, and boat building was passed down from one generation to the next. They would personally mentor young fishermen, teaching them the time-honored practices that had sustained their people for centuries. It was a delicate balancing act, embracing new opportunities for trade while ensuring that the core identity and skills of their community remained intact. In this way, wealth became a profound responsibility, not just a personal reward. Their influence was anchored not in hoarding riches, but in ensuring the prosperity and stability of everyone around them. Think of a bustling Swahili harbor at sunset. The sky is painted in hues of orange and purple, casting a warm glow on the coral stone buildings that line the waterfront. The dhows have returned, their decks laden with the day's catch. A noble figure, respected and serene, oversees the flurry of activity. Merchants from different lands haggle good-naturedly, their voices mingling with the calls of seagulls. Children, their faces bright with purpose, carry baskets of salted fish to the storehouses, each one playing a part in this intricate economic dance. This scene isn't just about commerce. It's a living testament to a community thriving under the guidance of its patrons. The ocean was the ultimate teacher. It was a force that shaped the character of these leaders as much as their nets shaped the reefs. Their unparalleled knowledge of the tides, the seasonal monsoons, the hidden currents, and the behavior of storms granted them immense power. It allowed them to navigate where others could not, and to predict catches with uncanny accuracy. But this power was always tempered with a deep sense of humility. The sea was too vast, too powerful to ever be truly conquered. It demanded respect. A wise noble would teach his apprentices that true leadership was not about giving orders, but about listening. Listening to the whispers of the wind, the stories of the elders, and the needs of the community. It was about observing the subtle changes in the water and the sky, just as one observes the mood of the marketplace. It was about acting decisively, but only after careful consideration. Above all, they taught that one must honor the ocean as one honors one's own ancestors. It was the source of all life and prosperity, a living entity that provided for them. But it was also a mirror. The sea could be calm and generous, or it could be turbulent and unforgiving. In its reflection, they saw a measure of their own wisdom, their own values, and their own status. A family that lived in harmony with the sea, that managed its resources with foresight and respect, was a family that would endure and prosper. The ocean was both their greatest asset and their ultimate judge, a constant reminder of the balance between power and humility that defined the noble families of the Swahili coast. This intricate social structure built on a foundation of maritime skill and communal responsibility, is what allowed Swahili coastal culture to flourish for centuries. It was a system where wealth was tied to welfare, and leadership was earned through service. Join us next time as we sail further into this fascinating world, exploring the legendary voyages of the dhows and the distant shores they connected. The stories of the great master fishermen, the Nahoda are not confined to dusty books. They live on, vibrant and powerful, in songs sung by the shore, in praise poems recited at gatherings, and in the oral histories passed from one generation to the next. These aren't just tales. They are lessons wrapped in epic narratives. They speak of incredible courage, of launching dhows through the churning fury of stormy waters when others dared not leave the harbor. They tell of an almost supernatural skill of predicting the unseen migrations of fish, knowing where the shoals would be as if by instinct. And they recount a deep wisdom of mediating disputes with a fairness that bound the community together. Through these powerful narratives, the deeds of the ancestors become a guiding light for the present and the future, weaving a strong thread of cultural identity directly into the fabric of daily life. Imagine, for a moment, the scene on a Swahili beach as the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. A group of young people are gathered around an old dhow, its wooden hull weathered by countless voyages. Their hands are busy restoring it, but their minds are on the past. They reflect on the ancestral methods, the ingenious ways their forefathers built these vessels to dance with the waves. The calm waters of the Indian Ocean act as a mirror, reflecting not just the golden sunset, but the legacy of an entire people. This isn't just boat repair. It's a conversation with history, a revival of knowledge that could have been lost to time. They are learning that the strength of the wood and the curve of the hull hold stories of survival, prosperity, and a profound connection to the sea. In modern Swahili communities, this reverence for the past is anything but a relic. It is a living, breathing part of their world. Young people are taught from an early age to respect the sea, not as a resource to be exploited, but as a powerful, life-giving entity that deserves gratitude. They learn to value hard-won skill and deep knowledge over empty arrogance. They are taught that the wealth of a family, earned from the bounty of the ocean, is not just for personal gain. It carries with it a profound responsibility, a duty of care for their community and for the ocean itself. This ethos is beautifully showcased in festivals that celebrate traditional fishing. These are joyous occasions, filled with the rhythmic pulse of dances, the resonant power of ancient chants, and captivating demonstrations of techniques that have been perfected over centuries. It's here, in these moments of shared celebration, that the continuity between past and present becomes tangible, ensuring the spirit of the Nahoda lives on. The tide, in its eternal rhythm, carries more than just water. It carries memory. It carries the echoes of generations of fishermen. Each wave that gently laps against the ancient coral reefs, each heavy net pulled from the turquoise depths, resonates with centuries of careful observation, tireless labor, and an unwavering respect for the marine world. The elite fishing families, through their mastery of the sea, their prudence in managing its resources, and their guidance of the next generation, have cemented their role as both guardians of the ocean and bearers of a rich, vibrant culture. Their legacy is not an abstract concept. You can see it. It is visible in the graceful silhouettes of the dhow fleets gliding along the horizon at dawn. You can hear it in the lively, rhythmic cadence of the coastal markets where the day's catch is sold. And you can feel it in the stories passed from parent to child, whispered like secrets from the sea itself. Let's just pause here for a second and listen. Can you feel it? The wind carries a gentle hum of history, a melody composed over centuries. The ocean whispers its secrets, but only to those who take the time to truly listen. The hands that cast the nets today, strong and capable, are connected by an invisible thread to the hands that first shaped these traditions hundreds of years ago. The very spirit of the Swahili coast endures, a powerful force present in both the ceaseless tide and the timeless story. Here, the line between making a living, celebrating culture, and honoring heritage simply dissolves. It blurs into a magnificent tapestry, where the sea, the family, and the community are woven together so tightly they are inseparable. Every single catch is more than just food. It is an act that honors the ancestors who taught them how and where to fish. Every careful repair of a dhow is not just maintenance, it is a conscious continuation of a legacy, ensuring the vessels that define their identity will sail for another generation. And every lesson taught to a young apprentice is a sacred trust, a promise that the profound knowledge of the ocean will not only survive but thrive. Through these deeply ingrained practices, Swahili fishermen remain so much more than mere laborers. They are custodians of a living history, a vibrant and enduring connection to a past that continues to shape their present and future. This living history is a testament to adaptation and resilience. The world has changed dramatically over the centuries, with new technologies, new economic pressures, and new environmental challenges. Yet, the core principles of the Swahili fishing culture have remained steadfast. This isn't because they are resistant to change, but because their traditions are built on a foundation of sustainability that is more relevant today than ever. The ancient wisdom of not overfishing, of understanding the life cycles of marine species, and of respecting breeding grounds. These are the very principles that modern conservationists are now championing. The *NAHODHA* understood that the ocean's health was directly linked to the community's prosperity. To take too much today was to steal from their own children's future tomorrow. This long-term perspective, this deep-seated prudence, is perhaps their most valuable inheritance. It's a wisdom that extends beyond the act of fishing itself. It's about community. The structure of these fishing families and the networks they form create a social safety net. When one boat has a poor catch, another shares its bounty. When a family faces hardship, the community rallies. This spirit of mutual support, of *Ujima, or familyhood, is the glue that has held these coastal societies together through famine, conflict, and change. The wealth generated by the sea circulates within the community, funding weddings, building mosques, and educating children. The dhow is not just a tool for one family, it's an asset for the collective. Its success is everyone's success. This intricate social fabric is as vital to their survival as the nets and the boats. It demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of social economics, where prosperity is measured not just by individual accumulation, but by the well-being of the entire group. As we watch the last sliver of the sun dip below the horizon, the sky ablaze with gold and crimson, we see a newly restored dhow being sailed by the youth. It cuts gracefully through the water, its triangular sail catching the evening breeze. The gentle waves reflect the fiery sky, and in the distance, the faint outlines of the coral reefs are visible beneath the surface. This is not just a beautiful picture, it is a symbol of hope and continuity. It represents the successful transfer of knowledge, passion, and responsibility. The young sailors at the helm are not just navigating the waters, they are navigating their heritage. They hold the future of this culture in their hands, guided by the stars above and the wisdom of the generations that came before them. Their journey across the bay is a promise that the legacy of the Swahili coast, its stories, its skills, and its profound respect for the sea, will continue to sail onward, carried forward on the eternal tide. As the sun sinks low, it paints the waves in molten gold and soft purple. Here on the Swahili coast, the day's labor draws to a close. The fishermen have returned, their dhows now resting quietly against the shore. Nets that were cast wide just hours ago are now carefully coiled, and the air carries a unique blend of salt, smoke, and drying fish. The once bustling market streets have emptied, and lanterns begin to flicker in the coralstone alleys, casting a warm, gentle glow. In this profound calm, the ocean itself seems to breathe in rhythm with the people, a silent acknowledgement of the delicate balance between labor, patience, and reverence that has shaped this coast for generations. It's in these quiet moments that we truly see the fishermen, not as heroes or mythical figures, but as human beings. Their lives intricately bound to the rhythm of the tides and the whims of the sea. They rise before the sun even considers painting the sky, charting waters known intimately only through the wisdom passed down through their families. They face storms and scarcity, not with fanfare, but with a silent, steadfast endurance. Their lives are measured in the simple, repetitive acts: the cast of a net, the whisper of the waves against the hull, and the steady, familiar pull of the ocean. Yet, the impact of these simple lives resonates far beyond the shoreline, shaping the very soul of this community. The teachings of the elders linger in every action, in every decision made. When you see a young apprentice kneeling beside his father, meticulously mending a tear in a net, you're witnessing more than just a skill being taught. He is learning the patience required to wait for the right moment, the respect for the tools that provide for his family, and the foresight needed to sustain not just himself, but an entire community. This is a classroom without walls, where lessons are absorbed through observation and practice. Every ritual performed at dawn, every quiet blessing offered over the nets before they are cast, every song sung in unison while hauling in a heavy catch, these are the threads that bind the present to a heritage stretching back centuries. Knowledge here is not shouted from rooftops. It is passed quietly, deliberately, like a ripple spreading across still water. This gentle transfer ensures that the culture, the very identity of the Swahili people, survives alongside their livelihood, intertwined and inseparable. It's a living history, reenacted with every sunrise. Even the hardships they face are woven into the fabric of their story. The unpredictable tides, the sudden squalls that can whip the sea into a frenzy, and the occasional, humbling scarcity of a poor catch, these are not seen as failures, but as teachers. They teach humility. They serve as a constant reminder that the fishermen are guests on the ocean's vast stage, not its masters. It is in this delicate balance of skill and surrender, of hard-won wealth and tireless labor, that the Swahili coast has not only survived, but thrived. And in that endurance, a quiet, subtle magic persists, a magic that beautifully blends human effort with the living, breathing pulse of the sea. As night deepens, the markets sleep beneath a silvered moon. The lanterns are dimmed, and the scent of preserved fish mingles with the clean, salty air. The families that have guided these waters for generations carry a dual burden: the weight of memory and the mantle of responsibility. Their legacy isn't just measured in the bounty of the sea or the profits from trade. It's found in the continuity of their practices, in their profound respect for the natural rhythms that sustain all life, and in the stories that echo through the coralstone alleys and across the sandy beaches. To walk along these shores is to walk among ancestors. To cast a net is to whisper to those who came before. As we settle into this final quiet, you can almost feel the ocean's patient heartbeat beneath your feet. The dhows sway gently in the harbor, the nets lie folded and ready for the dawn, and the fisherman's day ends in perfect rhythm with tides that have flowed, unchanged, for centuries. The lessons they offer extend far beyond this coast. They teach us about patience in a world that demands instant results. They show us the value of diligence and hard work. They remind us to respect the unseen forces that shape our lives, and, perhaps most importantly, they highlight the profound importance of passing knowledge and wisdom from one generation to the next. Let us just pause for a moment. Listen, the fire crackles softly. The waves whisper against the sand. The night air carries a lullaby older than memory itself. The Swahili fishermen, the families who have guided them, and the ocean that nurtures them all, they leave us with a powerful reflection on endurance and harmony. They remind us that our own endeavors are most enduring when they are aligned with nature, not against it. They teach us that true wealth carries with it a deep sense of responsibility, and that a culture survives not in monuments of stone, but in the rhythm of daily life, in the balance of toil and respect. Though the nets are now folded and the dhows rest, the spirit of this coast endures, vibrant and unbroken. The waves recede, the markets are still, but the rhythm of these lives continues beneath the tides. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you were moved by this story, please consider subscribing and joining our community. We have many more stories to share. You are now under Baobab skies.